Hey, everybody, it's Doug Green, and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News. And I'm very pleased to have with us again Christian Stredicke of Vodia. Christian, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the topic is going to be synthetic voice and how synthetic voice will be a great combination with human voice. Of course, if we get over some of the challenges and hurdles. So that we will be talking about too. But first, before we jump into the topic of synthetic voice, what is Vodia?
Vodia makes telephone systems for the cloud, on-premise, pretty secure. So we try to cover lots of industries. And we're also now starting to work with AI.
And why is a company like Vodia interested in synthetic voice?
Well, I mean, we do have interactions with customers. So for example, we like the ability to speak different languages. That's something that a human cannot do. I think many people appreciate it if they can just talk their native language when they're talking to an IVR. And with that, you can obviously also generate different accents and different even moods if you want to. So it's an interesting playground.
So, Christian, why do you think that, we have all sorts of different takes on synthetic voice? Some people are a little bit worried and scared of it. There's fraud issues. But you're concluding that it's going to be a great combination with the human voice.
Yeah, I mean, one use case is that you have a call center agent, and that agent doesn't have a good accent, and you can essentially say, okay, you're essentially using that as a template for having a conversation with a client, with a caller, and then that synthetic voice could essentially talking the same content, but with a more beautiful voice. That would be one useful use case, and a good one, right? So something that we would enjoy, something that would provide a value, and would be great to see that.
What are the economics like here? In other words, is there a reason for us to be embracing basically the synthetic voice?
I mean, it definitely opens the market for more call center agents, right? I think in a lot of cases, you're dealing with non-native speakers, and that opens up possibility for just getting more people on board and providing a better experience.
So we're talking about an expanded experience. And you were speaking to me just before we started about language. So one of the big barriers in communication for humankind always has been we all speak different languages.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a native English speaker, so if I can, I speak German. I enjoy speaking German, right? And I always, whenever I run to a German, I love to talk German then, right? And I would definitely love it. Let's say I'm calling my bank, and it turns out that the agent is talking German. I would love to do that, right? So, but it's okay. The Germans are not that many on the planet if you look at the total numbers, right? So the chances I'm really running to somebody in the call center who speaks German in America is pretty low. But if I am talking to an artificial agent, that possibility is practically 100%, right? So, and that's a great thing. And there are a lot of people like me, maybe not so many Germans, but there's a lot of people come from Asia, from Spanish-speaking countries, right? From South America, Africa, and everything. So for them, it's all a great experience if they can talk a native language.
And is this where the synthetic voice comes in? Because with as you say, there is maybe not a surplus of German speaking contact center agents. Some of the initial work that you might do at the contact center as a German speaking person would be done with synthetic voice in German until maybe you reach a live agent.
Essentially, you can do two layers. Right? The one is like essentially you speak English, but with an accent, and that is
Yeah.
being translated into like the accent-free English. But that's essentially stage one, or some stage. Another stage is, of course, the live translation, where essentially you have a robot translating something that into a different language, which is also a reality in many online conferencing already, right? So when we're having our conference calls, I see like a couple of the employees on the live translation. So they see like the text at the bottom of the video call, and you can see the eyes moving, right? They're moving like left, right. You can see they're reading the German text when we're talking English, because that is what they understand better. And why not synthesizing that and essentially making that something like audio instead of video, instead of a text? And I think that is only a logical next step. Maybe it's already some service, maybe already offering that. And I think that's also a great experience and a great service.
Now, let me be bold and ask an interesting question. Do you think that within a year or two, you and I might be having this conversation, just exactly the way we are now, but you're actually responding to me in German, but I am only recording it in English, your response?
Yeah, I mean, there are already demos doing that. It's definitely nice for those that really don't speak the language, right? So let's say you're talking to this Japanese guy and he doesn't speak any English, and that's the only way you can do it. I think it comes at the price of delay.
Yeah.
Because the conversation is not going to be that vivid, right? So it takes some time until the robot really gets what we're talking about, and then there's maybe 3 or 4 seconds delay with whatever you say. So I believe we would probably still talk English. My English is still good enough, okay. But I think there are other cases where people would definitely prefer the translation, and having a few seconds of delay wouldn't be a problem for them.
Christian, let me also ask you again. This is a tough one. There's translation and there's translation.
Right.
Right. So, you mentioned something very interesting. I'm trying to think in my mind. There's, I think, more nations than many people think where German is a primary language, or at least a major minority language, right? Obviously, Germany and Austria, but also I think Switzerland is a significant German speaking population. I think part of Italy, and some other places too. Am I right?
Yeah, that's roughly the area. I would say like maybe 150 million people all in all speak German.
Right.
So
So
I mean,
this is,
compared to the total population of the planet, it's a small number, right?
but this would mean that you have more German speaking. Although, in other words, we have a bad habit, especially maybe in America, of thinking of German as being spoken in Germany. You just told me there are more German speakers than all the people who live in Russia. Right. And
Yeah.
right now, so it is this. It is, yes. Globally, it's not a huge language, but in Europe, it is certainly as large a language as a first language as would be Spanish, Portuguese, English, Dutch, so on. Right.
French, yeah.
Yeah. It's certainly a prevalent language. And let's get them again back into economics. You would be so much better off if you were able to market and talk to that 150 million people in their native language. Is a significant gain.
Yes, actually, I just mentioned French because I think in France it's even more obvious, because the French people, they love French, okay?
Right.
And for them, the language barrier is much bigger than I would say than the Germans on average. So, and having a feature that you can actually have a conversation between French and English without any pain, make it really smooth, would definitely solidify essentially the French language as well, because people have even less reason to invest in the speaking the English language, right? It
Right.
actually would help keeping that language alive. So if you go for a little bit more north to Sweden and to Scandinavian countries, because the population number is relatively small, so they, for many, many years already grow up with the bilingual, because all the content is in English essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why the English is so good, because from childhood ages on, they have to talk English, or at least listen to English as well. So, and I think if this would be available as well to translate everything, all the content automatically into their local language, I think then they would have a less reason to learn a second language. So, and I think that, is it a good thing? I think it is maybe just becoming a reality that, kids are lazy, as we all know, right? And if they can have the movie in their local language, I would say they're probably going to see that in their local language. So I think the trend is actually going into the direction that the local languages have a higher chance of surviving now than they had like a few years ago.
I'm glad you brought up local languages, because I was thinking as you were talking about the number of German speaking people, and it's a large number across several countries. And as you know, in English, You have American English, you have British English, you also have Indian and Pakistan English, right?
Scottish,
African
right?
English, got it, yeah.
It's really getting tough. Yeah, yeah.
And even within the United States, or across some of these spectrums, there are sometimes can be confusion. And let's talk about, again, now we're talking about contact center, where someone's talking about money, healthcare, buying a car, these types of things. There can be a lot of confusion in terms of how things are said. Is it so also? I know in French you have Quebecois, Canadian French, and then of course you have French as it's spoken in France, and perhaps different variants elsewhere in the world. I imagine it's so in Germany too, or for
Yeah, I
German
think
speaking.
so we had this old topic of the codec, right? Let's say you have packet loss and the codec invents content, right?
Right,
Because there's nothing being said for a few milliseconds, and you just continue the waves from the previous few milliseconds. But now if you make this longer and saying they're kind of synthesizing what you're talking about at the moment, right? So essentially it's saying, so would you buy this car? And then suddenly packet drops, right? And the codec could say yes, right? You know what I mean, right? So, and now essentially we have that codec. It's called AI. So the AI is really aware of the conversation and then saying, okay, so if I think about it, after all what they were talking about, the guy would buy the car and it would
right,
generate a yes, right? So then, of course, the question is, I never said that. Is it legal? Is it legally usable? I think in that case, it's not legally usable, obviously, right? But where do you draw the line, right? Let's say we're having a conversation between Japanese and English. And I think if this eventually, let's say, this goes to court because there was a contract, we will see how the court will handle these cases, right?
right.
Obviously, there might be easy cases, difficult cases, but there's definitely going to be a gray zone. And for these kind of things, and then you think of medical, like banking and stuff, and I think these industries are probably going to be a little bit more careful about using these features. But on the other hand, if we're having a conversation about something, what we're doing right now, right? I think then the legal requirements are very low there, and I think that one would be definitely much, much more mainstream.
So, Christian, what is Vodia's vision for this?
I mean, we are not the company who are generating all this AI stuff. That is a huge topic, huge money, and so on. But what we're going to do is definitely look at the APIs, because luckily all these features are available through APIs. We gladly use it. We gladly support it. We're already supporting AI interfaces. So we want to provide the tool to bring this essentially to the customers to roll those out in real life. And obviously, we want to watch what's happening so that we are able to access the right APIs.
Well, Christian, I want to thank you for joining me today. This is very interesting. Thanks for giving us a little bit of some better understanding, I think, of the role of synthetic voice, that it can be a good thing, and also for bringing in also, I think, the complicated topic of language, and of reaching customers, reaching workers, reaching whoever you're talking to in the language that they're most comfortable in, their native language. Where can we learn more about Vodia?
You can go to vodia.com, and we have a lot of links there where you can find more information.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much indeed for joining me today. Everybody take a look at vodia.com. There's a rich amount of information, and also information on Vodia's product lines and so on, and a lot of innovation. Christian, thank you for joining me again.
Thanks for having me.